Hi, it's Jeffy from VIP Vision. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to configure PTZ or pan tilt zoom camera functions using the camera's built-in web interface with Internet Explorer. Some of the functions that we're going to go over include tours, presets, and patterns. If you're unfamiliar with any of these three things, then I suggest you check our previous video that we'll show down below, which showed how to configure this via a network video recorder. Now, this video is going to assume that we already have access to the camera, that we can access the camera via its IP address. So again, I suggest that you check other videos showing how to configure your camera's IP address and how to connect to the web interface, our other videos on those topics before you proceed if you're currently unable to do so. Now, so the first thing we're going to do is I'll just jump across to a PC. So as I mentioned, we're going to do this in Internet Explorer. So first thing is opening Internet Explorer. Make sure that we're not in Edge, because Edge is not going to work for us. We must have Internet Explorer rather than Edge, and we're going to go to the IP address of the camera. Now, if you haven't logged into the camera before, then you are very likely going to be prompted here with an option to install plugins or some other sort of control. You will need to install the plugins, acknowledge all warning messages and install the plugins before it's going to let you log into the camera and view any images. If you do have any issues with that, then I suggest you delete the plugins from Internet Explorer and reinstall them. Okay, so I'm going to log in with admin and admin, which is the default username and password on this camera. Now, I'd suggest that if you are running this camera on an untrusted network or it's got any chance of being accessed via the internet, then you change this username and password. In my case, it's just a demo camera, so I'm going to click cancel. And you'll see we have our PTZ here. Now I can move it around. Now just by virtue of the way that this is set up, it might look a little bit clunkier than you'd otherwise expect, but that's just so that we can record this for the video. So the first thing I'm going to do is click setup. Now, that'll drop you into the camera and conditions section. Now, from here, we could adjust things like brightness, contrast, etc. That's not what we're going to be doing in this video. We're actually going to be adjusting the pan, tilt, zoom functions. So I'm going to click PTZ and then function. Now, from this, you can see we have preset, tour, scan, pattern, pan, PTZ speed, idle motion, power up, time task, PTZ restart, and default. Now, we'll go through these things one at a time. But the first one that you're going to see here is preset. Now I'm going to zoom in just a touch so you can see this a little more easily. Okay, so as I said, our first section that we have up here is preset. Now before we do anything, we will need to add a preset. Now this is not saving anything to do with the location of the preset, it's just adding a preset. So I'm going to say that I want to add 5 separate presets. Now, I'm going to select preset 1 again. Oops, we should probably, we'll do it one at a time here. So we'll go preset 5. We'll just delete these back out again. We'll just do one at a time. So I'm going to move this across to somewhere that I consider interesting. And then I'm going to save the location. So now that's succeeded. So now I'm going to move it to somewhere else that I also find interesting. So I'm going to zoom in down here on this number plate. Okay, I'm going to add a preset and I'm going to save the preset. Okay, you'll see that we've got little preset 2 up here, so you know that it's definitely been saved to the camera. Now I'm going to swing around and find somewhere else that might be a little bit interesting. Zoom in a little bit here. And we'll just zoom in those chairs there, and I'll add that as a preset and then save. Now I'll do a couple more up to preset 3. Zoom out a little bit. Zoom in over here a little bit, across the road. And I'll add a preset and save that. And one more. And I'll add a preset there and save that. Okay, so now we've actually saved these presets and I can click between them now. So I can just click on the preset and it will flick back and forth between the presets. As we mentioned in a previous video, presets you can consider as video bookmarks. So it'll come back to exactly the same position every time you click it. Even after the camera's been rebooted, these presets will stay in the same place and they'll stay there forever, or until we delete them. So on that note, if we wanted to delete a preset here, you've got our little buttons down the side. I could, for instance, delete preset 3 and it's gone. So now I've only got 4 presets. Keep in mind that I've gotten rid of number 3, so 1, 2, 4, and 5 still exist. So if we had a tour that was running using 1, 2, 4, and 5, that would still work correctly. Okay, so that's presets done. Next thing we'll move on to tours. So let's click tour. Now, as with if you were configuring this using the recorder, the first thing we need to do is add a tour. So our tour name, we'll just, sorry, we won't zoom around there, that's fine. So we're going to add a tour. Now we're going to add a name to that tour. So I'm going to double click and call it test. So we have test. Now I could actually add another tour if I wanted to. And I could call this 2. And now we can switch between the 2 tours that we just saved. Now there's nothing in these tours yet. We still need to add presets. So I'm going to select number 1. I'm going to click add. And this is going to add, actually that's going to add a preset. Now we need to set up what we want to do with this preset. So at the moment it's going to be preset 1. I could change this to any of the presets that I just set before. So preset 1, 2, 4, and 5, you'll notice 3 is missing because we deleted 3. So I'm going to set it to go to preset 2 to start with. Then I'm going to add one more and say that we're going to want it to go to preset 5 next. One more to preset 1. Add one more to preset 4. And we can set the duration that we're going to hover on these presets. So if I click back up here, I'm going to spend 10 seconds on there. I probably don't want to spend 10 seconds there. Maybe I only want to spend 3 seconds there. Oh, 5's our minimum, so I'll set to 5. Let's say I want to spend maybe 8 seconds here. And we'll say 9 seconds here. And 5 seconds here. Now this could go, we could obviously make this quite long. We could say 900 seconds if we wanted to, but I'm going to make it 5 seconds, which is our minimum. And now I'm going to save. And you'll see operation succeeded. So now I've saved everything into our first tour. Our second tour is now empty still, so I'm going to add some presets to our second tour now. I'm just going to add preset 1. I'll add 3 presets here and I'll change them. So we'll go to 1, and then we'll go to 4, and then we'll go to 2. And we're going to do 30 seconds, and 5 seconds, and 10 seconds. We'll just leave that at 10. Again, I can save this tour. And there you go. Now we've saved test, which is our tour 1, and 2, which is our second tour. To verify that these are functioning correctly, I'll actually switch back to recorder now just so that you can see what we've just done. So if I go into PTZ control, and this is just for test. Keep in mind we're not actually configuring anything on this recorder. I just want to show you that these functions are now working that we've set through the PTZ camera. So I could come in here and I could say I want to run tour number 1. It's going to start at preset 2. It's going to flick to preset 5. It's going to hover there for as long as I told it to hover. We're going to go back to preset 1 now. And preset 4. So that's just to show you that it is actually functioning. Our presets and things are working as we would expect them to work. I'm going to stop that now, just so that it doesn't confuse our next step. But if I switch back here, so yeah, so you can see these are the tours that we've created. So that's tours. So the next thing I'll do is I'll just show you scan. So scanning is when we've got our PTZ, we've got it pointed at an area and we want it to simply to move from position A and to pan across or scan through to position B and then go back again. So we're just going to go back and forth over an area all day long. Before we do that, however, we actually have to set our endpoints. So we have to set our leftmost position and our rightmost position on our endpoints. So we'll do that now on this. So I'll just flick you back. Okay, so the first thing, as I mentioned, we've got scans set up in here, but we're going to select and set our left limit. Okay, before we do that, I'm going to zoom out. Okay, and I'm going to set our left limit. So I'm going to go as far left as I want to go on this scan. I'm going to set it. Oops, sorry. I'm going to set the left limit here. You'll see that it says operation successful, operate succeeded. And I'm going to say that I want my right limit to be here. Okay, so now we can actually set up our scans and adjust them. So I'm going to leave the speed set at 5 at the moment, but we're in scan 1 at the moment. So scan 1, speed set to 5, and I'm going to click start. Okay, so you'll notice that now it's going to stop us from actually doing anything here. We're not going to be able to change anything while the scan's in operation, but there you go. You can see that we're now scanning left and right, left and right. Now this may not be particularly useful at that speed level, so I'm going to stop that and slow it down a bit. So now we're going to go down to the lowest speed. I'm going to click start. Okay, so that's more like what you probably want to be seeing during a normal scan. You might want to just scan and use those same positions that we mentioned earlier in our left limit and our right limit, and it'll just flip between those two positions. Now, I'm going to stop that. Again, the same as with tour, if we want to, we could actually add more scans. So I could come in here, I could set a different left and right limit. Okay, for instance, so if I just said, make my left limit here, and make my right limit, let's say here, and start that. You'll see that we're going to go between those two limits now on scan number 2. Now I could also trigger this through the recorder the same way that I did with the tour before, just to show you, but we'll just leave it for this. I think you can see that our scans are functioning properly. So I'm going to click stop on that, just so it doesn't confuse us for the next step, but that's scan. That's how you set up a scan. So the next one on the list is pattern. So as I mentioned before, our patterns are, we actually want to follow a set pattern. So something, we're going to start recording a pattern, and then we're going to move the PTZ wherever we want it to do. We're going to zoom it in, we're going to zoom it out, we're going to move it, pan it left and right, we're going to tilt it left, up and down, we're going to hover in locations as long as we want to hover there, and then we're going to click stop, and then everything that you've just recorded, the camera is going to play back from start to finish, and then go back to the start again and play it back again. So it can be a little more flexible than setting up tours where we're just going through presets, but I'll flick back there now. Okay, so we're going to start recording a pattern. So first up, we actually have to click the set button here, and we're going to go start recording. Now you'll see that our pattern record setup has started, so now anything that I do is going to be recorded. So I'm going to sit there and I'm going to zoom in. Then I'm going to wait a little bit, and then I'm going to move up a little bit more, a little bit more. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, move across a little bit more. I'm going to zoom back out again. Going to spin around. Okay, I'm going to just zoom in a little bit more here. And now I'm going to click stop. Okay, so now our pattern recording is stopped. So everything that I just did has now been recorded into pattern number 1. So when I click start, again, it will disable the controls while we're running. Ignore that message. You'll notice that it's doing exactly what I did. So I zoomed in, I moved up a bit, I moved up a bit more. And you can see up here, we're actually stepping through the recorded pattern. You can see our steps up here. So we've got pattern 1. And you'll see that it's counting down. Now we're going to count all the way to step 36. And then once we're done with step 36, we're actually going to go back to step 1 again. So we'll just wait for that to happen. $33, $35, and there's 36. Now you'll see I hovered there for a little bit, and now we're going to come back. And there you go, now we're playing again. Back at number 3. And this will just continue until you stop it. So it'll keep looping forever. So I'm going to stop that now. As with before, obviously this is pattern 1. We can set more patterns in here if we'd like, so I could set up pattern 2. Again, this can be accessed through the recorder if I wanted to, through an MVR. I'm just going to leave that one pattern there, but if we did want to create another one, I'd select number 2. Again, I would go set, and then I would record the pattern, and then that would be saved into position 2. So I think that should go over patterns for you. So the next thing that we're going to click on is pan. So pans are pretty basic. Essentially what we're going to talk about with a pan is it's just going to go the whole way around. So I'm just going to click pan, and we're just going to auto pan all day long. Not particularly useful, particularly at that speed. So I can slow that down as well. I'd suggest that when you've got patterns and you've got scan, then pan is not really, there's not a great deal of point with pan, but this is where you set your default pan speed. So that's basically all this section is about. So I'm just going to stop that pan there. I don't think it's something that many people are going to use, but it is there if you want it. So our next thing is PTZ speed. Now this is our default PTZ speed for when we're doing anything else. So you can see that when I'm just moving around here, this is obviously we have our speed down the bottom here as well, but this is sort of like a scaling factor. So if I click high, you see that the camera can now actually, it's a little bit clunky just because of the way that we're set up here, but you'll see the camera can now go as fast as it can go. Useful for some scenarios, but you may actually just want to leave it at middle, or you can even set it to low, and you'll notice that that'll just make sure that the camera's not too fast when people are trying to adjust it. So PTZ speed, that's that there. I'm going to set it back to middle. Honestly, most of the time you're just going to leave it at middle. No one's going to need to change that. Idle motion. So this is the other one after preset tour, scan, and pattern that you're really going to be most interested in. So if you think about a PTZ, what we're usually going to do in practice is it's going to be sitting there and it's going to be on a tour or a pan or something. It's going to be moving up, down, left, right, and it's just going to do that all day, either a pattern, a tour, something like that. Now, the problem with that is that occasionally people go, oh, they see something interesting and they want to zoom in on that thing. The problem though is that after they've zoomed in on that, so they take control of the PTZ, they zoom in, they finish looking at whatever they're looking at, and then rather than putting the PTZ back in the pattern that it was in, or putting it back into the tour that it was in, they just leave it, which is obviously kind of useless for the PTZ at that point, because it's now just pointing at some random object which may or may not even be there anymore, and it's not really a great deal of help to us. So what the idle motion section does is it sets up the PTZ to go back to doing something after it hasn't been touched for a while from manual operation. So what we would usually do is we'll set this to a not so much a preset, but we'll set it to a, well, we could set it to a preset if we always wanted the camera pointed at the gate, unless someone had moved it manually. We could set it so that it always puts itself back at the gate. We could set it so that it's always going back and running a tour. Or we could set it so that it's always doing, you know, a scan or a pattern, for instance. But essentially just keep in mind, think about the idle motion as whatever the PTZ does when no one's touching it, and it puts itself back in that mode. So I'll just flip back now. So idle motion, as I described, we can enable our idle motion setting here. So I'm going to click enable, and I'm going to select either a preset, a tour, a pattern, or a scan. Now, I set up a pattern before, so I'm going to select that. I set up presets, tours, and pans and things as well, but pattern is the one that I'm going to do to show you here. So it was pattern number 1 that I set up before. Now our idle time is how long the PTZ will wait left in its position that whoever was using it was left it in before it decides to go back into a tour or a pattern or whatever you have it set up to do. Now, the 10-minute default time is actually quite good. It's quite a good way to have it, because what you'll find is that people will tilt the PTZ camera to where they're looking at, and then they'll just leave it while they're looking at, you know, whatever object they're interested in. What they don't necessarily want is the PTZ camera taking back control after a minute and starting to go back on the pan again, because whatever they're looking at might still be there. But that's where you adjust this. So we can go anywhere from 1 to 60 minutes. Now, just to show this, I'm just going to select 1 for the idle motion, and I'm going to click save. So now after 1 minute of not touching the PTZ camera, so 1 minute of not adjusting the PTZ camera at all, we're going to go back into pattern 1. So it's going to start pattern 1 up again. So while we're waiting for pattern 1 to come back in, I'll actually go to power up as well. So in power up, this is what the camera is going to do when it reboots. Now, auto, it will just start doing whatever it was doing when it lost power or when it restarted or whatever the camera did. However, you may wish to make sure that it always starts in a particular mode. Often, you know, you want to set it back into to do whatever it was doing when your idle motion thing's set up. So if we go to pattern and set 1, this will be setting exactly what we were setting before on the idle motion, which is probably what you want to do. So just keep in mind, idle motion is whatever the PTZ does when it's not being used. So there you go, it's been a minute since we last touched it, and now it's going to spin around and it's doing its pattern. Power up is what the PTZ is going to do when it reboots. Keep in mind that your idle motion will eventually fix your power up, or eventually override your power up anyway after the period that we set in idle motion. So if my idle time is 10 minutes, after 10 minutes after power up, no matter what you have set in this section here, the PTZ is going to go back and run the idle motion rather than whatever's set in the power up section. So they're two very important features. The idle motion more important than power up, but yeah, just keep in mind how idle motion works. So the next one on the list here is time task. So what we can actually do, if we want to, is we can set the PTZ to do different things depending on the time of day. So for instance, you wanted to set the PTZ to spin around and look at an entry gate in the morning, and you wanted it to spin around and look at an exit gate in the afternoon, we can do that. You could even set it up to do that and have it during the middle of the day. You could have it set to do a tour in the middle. So at the end of the day, start of the day, we look at gate A, end of the day, we look at gate B, but during the middle of the day, we're panning around throughout the site. So that's something that's very useful and that people will often like. It's a good thing to, I suppose, when you're looking at what PTZs can do, it's very good to not just have them sitting there idle all day waiting for someone to adjust them with their phone or with a PTZ keyboard or with the NVR. So that's something that's a good idea. So to set this up, I'll just cut back across. So our timer task here, we've got a number of tasks. We can set them all up to trigger on schedule. But same deal as the idle motion and power up section. So we could set a pattern, for instance, or maybe we'll set a preset. And we'll say we want to set a preset or preset 1. We want the PTZ to go to preset 1 between these times. So if I wanted the PTZ to flip across there every day at 9 a.m. to 9, well, let's say 10 a.m. and save. So now every day between 9 and 10 a.m. the camera is going to move to preset number 1. And you can do the same sort of thing for tours and for patterns and scans, obviously. But that's something that's really quite good. Remember, if you are going to use this, you do need to click the enable button at the top here. So the last couple on the list here, we have PTZ restart. Now what this is going to actually do is set the PTZ, it'll rehome the PTZ. So if for some reason the PTZ gets knocked out of whack when it's running, rather than having to unplug, power cycle the PTZ to get it to recenter itself and get all the presets back in position, you can actually click that button and the PTZ will move back to its location. Maybe it happened when you were installing it, you bumped it while it was during the PTZ actually was in a movement stage, so it's now out of whack with regards to the rest of the presets. Rather than power cycling, you can do it through the web interface. The last one on the list here is default. Now default's fairly self-explanatory, but what it will do is it will reset everything that we just did on the PTZ and put it back to the factory default. So you'll see that we're running a pattern now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to click the default button. The PTZ is going to remove everything we just did and it's going to run a restart. So when I say restart, as I mentioned before, the PTZ is now homing. So it's going to spin around and work out where the head position is in relation to where it thinks it should be. And then once it's done with that, it's just going to return to its home position. Just wait for it to restart. Okay, PTZ restart finished. So now that we've clicked, obviously we've clicked default, so nothing in presets, nothing in tours, our scan's gone back to normal, our pattern all needs to be set back up again, and everything's been cleared out. So if you do, for whatever reason, if you're playing around with PTZ settings and you want to make sure that everything is back to normal before you go ahead and try and set something up, that will reset it. Keep in mind, we don't actually change our power up task here. Power up stays the same, so it's just everything up until idle motion that it's going to change. And our timer task will remain the same as well. Okay, so I hope that that's been helpful. Just to go over it, we've gone through all of the PTZ function settings through using the web interface of the PTZ camera itself. If you've got any questions about this video or any other videos, feel free to leave a comment below. If you'd like us to do any other videos on PTZs or any other products, that's great. Just leave a comment below and we'll get onto that as soon as possible. If you're interested in these videos, please subscribe. We'll be doing a lot more of them. And yeah, it's been Jeff. Thank you.